let's get started. Hey everyone, thanks for joining. By way of introduction, my name is Melissa. I'm a first-year MBA student at Kellogg School of Management and part of the Decode team, and would love to give you a little bit more background on what Decode is about. Decode is most known for its largest tech and innovation forum, jointly hosted with UC Berkeley and Stanford student organizations, alumni networks, and entrepreneurship centers. We feature speakers at the forefront of technology, innovation, and entrepreneurship from around the world. And the mission at Decode is to give students, founders, and investors a platform to share, connect, and be inspired. Over the past 5 years, our annual Decode Innovation Conference have had over 10,000 audiences every year. And some of our notable speakers include founder and CEO of Zoom, board member of Tesla and SpaceX, CEO of Y Combinator, and CEO of Google X. Our most recent conference last October had gathered 1.3 million views across 44 countries. And since then, we've kicked off the speaker series and collaborated with MBA programs, with today, being our 8th session. And we'll also be launching a networking session in collaboration with Sloan, Haas, and Kellogg post our fireside chats over the next 2 months. So if you're currently an MBA student or an experienced professional that wants to participate in it, you can indicate your interest when registering for our event on Eventbrite. And as Shuo mentioned, we'll also be uploading the recording of today's session on our YouTube channel, and we'll be sending the link to everyone. So you can subscribe and follow us on YouTube, LinkedIn, and other social media handles. And also check out decode.build for more content, and subscribe to discover our upcoming speakers. And if you want to volunteer with Decode on future events or discuss potential partnerships with your school, you can send an email to careers@decode.build. And finally, after this long monologue, onto the logistics for today's event, the point of today. So after the fireside chat, there'll be a Q&A session, and you can send in any questions that you have for our speaker via the Zoom chat, and we'll try to go through as many questions as possible. For tonight's session, we're super pleased to welcome Henry Schuck. By way of introduction, Henry is the founder and CEO of ZoomInfo, which is formerly known as DiscoverOrg. It's a leading go-to-market intelligence solution for more than 16,000 companies worldwide. Henry founded the company in his law school apartment in 2007, and after 6 acquisitions, took ZoomInfo public in June 2020. And this session will be moderated by Shuo Chen, who is the general partner at IOVC, a lecturer at UC Berkeley, and a faculty member at Singularity University. And without further ado, I'm so glad to be done talking. Let's welcome Shuo and Henry.
Thank you very much, Melissa. Hi, everyone. Really great to have you all here. First, I want to start by thanking Henry for making time, despite his busy schedule, to be here with us. Really honored by you making the time for all of our students and alumni here. So to get started, would really love with you starting by telling your story of how you started ZoomInfo and all the things that you went through to ultimately bring it to become a publicly listed company.
How many hours do we have again? Not all the things. I'll skip over most of them. So my name is Henry Schuck. I'm the founder and CEO of ZoomInfo. Today we're a 2,000 employee publicly traded company on the NASDAQ. We went public in the middle of the pandemic last year. We're the first technology company that went public coming out of the pandemic, which is a really interesting time to be IPOing your business. But I founded the company in 2007. It was my first year in law school. And before 2007, when the story actually starts when I was 18 years old, I was in the dorms at the University of Nevada, Las Vegas. I finished my first year in college and I had no money. My mom had given me $5,000 from the remnants of a life insurance policy to go to college. Those were my college funds. And I went through those dollars the first year, and I was getting kicked out of the dorms, and I was looking for, in the summer, I was looking for a job to be able to pay rent in an apartment. And I found on the UNLV job board this position at a growing software as a subscription service business. And I didn't know what that meant, but they paid $12 an hour. And it was me and me and the founder of the company. I was basically an assistant at first, but we ended up growing a lifestyle business that was about 300,000 in revenue to 5 million in revenue over the next 4.5 years, and then sold the company the company sold to private equity. I went to law school, and kind of a year in, a friend of mine called me and said, "Hey, what do you think about starting a business that's kind of like that business, but doesn't directly compete?" And if you've heard about law school, the first year is the worst year of my life, like easily. I was finishing up finals, and I said, "Hey, I'm not that interested right now, but if you call me in like 3 weeks, and I'll let you know if I can help you." And he said, and I kind of figured, your friend has an idea to start a business, and 3 weeks later, like, they're not that interested in it anymore. But 3 weeks later to the day, he called me, he said, "I'm still interested. Will you help me do it?" So we started, at the time it was called DiscoverOrg. We both agreed to put $25,000 on our credit cards. I hired the first employee, started building out the software, which is software and data that helps business-to-business companies find their next best customer. And we went to market kind of 6 months after that. Grew the company in an organic and profitable way between 2007 and 2014. We didn't take any outside capital. And in 2014, we brought in our first institutional investor, which is a private equity firm called TA Associates, based in Menlo Park in Boston. And then really started investing in the business and being focused on building a really world-class organization across the company. Had the opportunity to do some M&A. It's interesting. I don't know when you grabbed the description of the 6 M&A acquisitions, because now we've done 9 now. So that is a motion in the business that we think we're pretty good at and have an opportunity to continue. So we've done 9 M&A acquisitions, went public. We have offices around the world, 7 offices on the West Coast, on the East Coast, and then we have a large R&D center in Israel. And the business is growing 40%. It's doing it profitably with 43% margins, and it feels like a really big total addressable market today that we're just barely scratching the surface of.
Amazing. Thank you for sharing. I think especially for a lot of the students or younger professional on this call, I'm sure they're really inspired to hear the story that you started your business so early. So maybe we'll go in chronological order. During the very early days, I'm sure many days felt very challenging. What were some of the toughest challenges you really came across in the very early days of the startup, and why did you persist?
Yeah, so, in the very early days of the start of the company, so we started the company in 2007, and then almost immediately after, a really well-funded startup started the exact same company, and like literally the same company, same focus, same go-to-market motion, same everything. And I remember exactly where I was when I found out about it. I was sitting on a couch in my law school apartment and just Googling around, I think, and came across this website for a company called Rain King. And I looked at it and thought, oh man, it's just the worst timing. We just started this company. I just decided I'm not going to go to on-campus interviewing with the biggest law firms in the country. I'm like deep into this thing. And some well-funded startup with a bunch of information services executives who've done this before just decided to get into this space where there was like literally no competition, really, the day before. And I remember just thinking like, I don't know, I really didn't know what was going to happen. I assumed that that we would be in business for kind of a few more months, and then that was going to be it. We just had money on credit cards, and they brought in, the senior bench of senior executives. I was 23. I may have turned 24 by then, but 23, 24. And I was like, that's it. what a bad decision this has been. And then I think two things happened. One, we just continued to build the business and try to pretend that that company didn't exist. And then they reached out to us and we offered to take a look at our business from an M&A perspective. And we were kind of 9 months into building the company. And we thought like, hey, maybe we could get a couple $1 million for this thing that we just started 8 months ago and just go do whatever, I don't know, anything else. And so we went out and we met with the founder and the CEO of the business. We met with their management teams. And at the end of the meeting, they just basically told us we didn't have a business. And like they said, it's not really a business. So we'll like license some things from you, but we're not interested in buying you as a going concern. And we walked away, went home, and we just were resolved to win in the space. And, fast forward, it's 2008, fast forward 9 years from then, and we acquired that company in a $300 million acquisition that really put we're both great companies at that point. And it put two really great companies together with a better value proposition for the market and allowed us to go build a much bigger company together. And but that moment in 2008 and it was pretty it was not a fun moment in the history of the company. But I think what I would tell you is if you're in a really big market, that means it's a really big market. And so there's lots of room for lots of players in it. Now, it's not going to be a one person only wins, which is a good reason not to fixate on your competition. I think competition is super healthy because they're both sides push each other to innovate, but fixating on one and everything that they do is just a waste of time, especially in a big market. And then the second thing is like, if you have a play and a plan, just stick to the plan. You can adjust it, but kind of keep going.
That's an amazing story, especially given the outcome in the end. So thank you for sharing.
Yeah, for sure.
It obviously sounds like from those early days that you've always had the mentality of being able to take these risks by even putting $25,000 on your credit card. So how did you think about this back then? Did you tackle this with a plan for what you wanted as an outcome, or have you always been very comfortable with risk taking?
Yeah, I think so. I benefited from having the experience at the company that I worked at in college. By the way, we ended up buying that company too in 2015. So I had this experience, so I was able to see a business grow and how it worked. And there weren't very many people at that business. It was kind of me and the founder and a handful of college kids. And so I really got to see how a business ran, and I got to see how much opportunity there was in the market. And so I didn't feel like I was taking a big risk. And then I was still getting my law degree, so I figured out how to work we start at 7 and I'd have class at 3:30. So I'd work from 7 to 3, then I'd go to class from 3:30, and I'd go to law school from 3:30 to 10:30. I think my last class would end. And so I figured out how to coordinate my schedule to be able to do both. And so I always kind of felt like, look, if the business thing doesn't work out, I can always go be a lawyer somewhere. I'm going to have a law degree from a good school. So I just never felt like it was taking a really big risk, that especially when you're 23 or 24, I knew I was diverting from the plan, right? The plan is go to law school, do interviews with big firms, take a summer at a large law firm, go work for that large law firm. So I think I was taking a risk with the path, but not so much with sort of where I thought I would end up. And I think I always believed, I think I always believed since I was young, that if I wanted to do something, all I really needed to do was work really hard and be focused on doing that thing. If I wanted to be wealthy, I could just focus on it. If I want to be the president, I could be president. I just have to work really hard at it. And so that mentality, I think, served me really well throughout, and just an important way to feel about everything you take on. And so risks didn't really feel like risks.
I think that's a really important point about just generally having a very empowered attitude and commitment to work hard. And also that when you're at a young age, you want to try your hand at entrepreneurship. The most important part is to actually go do it, to build the product and do something about it. And that's exactly what you did.
Yeah. By the way, I was super intimidated by, other software executives and the guy who ran a public company and the woman who ran a consumer startup. And I just thought they all had like something little like special, that like I didn't have, or only really special people had. And I think that's a great myth. Like there are very few people who have like extraordinary skill. Most people who are really successful are talented and smart and work really hard. And when you get in a room with really successful executives, you realize kind of you're all the same. You're in different industries or focused on different areas, but no one has like some special thing that you don't have. And so it just kind of goes back to really believing that you could accomplish anything you really want. I've heard that, and it's really unfortunate, it is a bigger dialogue, but I've heard that it's much harder today. And I think to believe that. And I think probably young people have a hard time believing that they can accomplish, anything. So even you should just believe that. It's the takeaway.
I think it's very sincere feedback and actually directly relates to one of our top voted questions on social media, which is obviously when you're starting out, it's the very beginning of a project, but as you grow the company over time and also acquire other companies, you have to acquire different skill sets and be constantly growing as the CEO and founder. So how did this process work for you? And what were some of the most important skills that you developed along the way or big growth points for you?
Yeah, it's a super interesting question because it's still happening, which is great. Like my job today is very different than it was a year ago. Today, that's a function of I've hired very good leaders underneath me, and then they have done a very good job of managing or leading or running some part of the organization that I used to be responsible for, or that I used to be running and operating. And once that happens, what happens to you is you have to go figure out where to spend that time. And as you go to make that decision, or when I go to make that decision, I always think like, okay, what are the things that I should be focused on right now? Is it strategy? Is it M&A? Is it operational? Is it talent? Is it HR? Is it culture? What are the top things for me to be focused on? And then how do I make sure that I'm great at all of those things? And so every year, I write, and I check in on it at the middle of the year, but I write sort of here are 10 to 15 maybe things that I want, that are key areas of focus for me this year, and I want to be really great at. And all of them, almost all of them by definition, require a skill I don't have. Because if I knew how to be great at one of these 15 things, I probably would have already been great at one of those 15 things. But instead, there'll be something like, hire a great VP of sales, or or figure out an e-commerce motion, or understand the international market, and if we want to do M&A there, or get a new product off the ground in the fastest way possible, or experiment with a new go-to-market model. And these are all things that this year, 2021 or 2020 or whatever, are really important to the business. And then it's up to me to go learn those skills that are required for me to make those things successful or not. And that is the motion. It's kind of every year, there are 15 things that I want our company to be really great at. And in order for me to do that, I can't just go like, hey, John, be great at this thing. It's like, I'm going to learn what great looks like. and understand what great really is, and then lay out a plan for us to be great in whatever that might be, and make sure we have the right people to go do that. But that's it. And I used to answer this question by saying I listen to the business. So the business will tell you kind of the things that you need to be great at. And really just listening to the business and going, hey, these are the 15 things. And then running after those just forces you to learn and acquire new skills and evolve. I don't really subscribe to the idea that there's a startup CEO and then there's a private equity CEO and then there's a public company CEO. I think there are 3 different personas that sort of are startup CEOs and mid-market CEOs and public company CEOs, and then like, blue chip company CEOs. There are different personas, but I really believe that you can learn your way through those. Or you could also be really comfortable saying like, I just don't want to. Like, I don't want to be a middle market CEO. I want to be the person who comes up with the idea, brings it to market, gets a little bit of sales going, and then I want to go find the next thing to do. That's my thing. But I don't think I don't think that you can't be the next stage and the next stage after that, but you can make a decision you don't want to be.
I think a really important point you mentioned is how to grow throughout the different phases of a company. If you were to look back onto your annual goals in the last X number of years, in retrospect, what would you say are some of the most important, maybe 1 to 3 skills or growth points that really helped bring you to where you are today?
Probably the number one, I would be shocked if not every sort of larger company CEO would not tell you this is their number one. But at some point, you have to get good at hiring people, great people. And you have to be great at identifying it. You have to be great at knowing where to look for it for your specific business. You have to be great at recruiting it and bringing it into the organization. And then you have to be great at making sure that that person has the ability to be really successful in your organization. So the number one thing is realizing how important it is to hire the best people, and then figuring out how to go do that, which is also, by the way, not that easy to do, because you're often looking for great people when you're in trouble somewhere. And so, oh no, sales is not going well. We better go hire a VP of sales. And then you go out and you're already behind because you're hurting in the business on that side. And the first few people you meet are almost always not the right people. And so you need to go through an exercise of meeting a lot of people, and that you tend not to have patience for. And so you make a choice quickly, you don't get great people, and then 6 months later, you have to do the whole thing over again. And so I think part of hiring great people is knowing you have to be really patient in the process. And you have to take your time to find the right people and cultivate them and recruit them in. So that is for sure the best lesson.
That's great. I've actually been getting a number of direct messages with questions that are related to that on people and culture. I guess I've gotten different iterations of the questions, so I'll try to summarize, which is, there are questions about dynamics with your co-founder in the early days, how it evolved throughout the years, and qualities, both interpersonal and intrapersonal, that you look for in a co-founder. But over time, that also directly relates to your point on hiring. So qualities that you would look for then later people that you had to hire and work very closely on a daily basis with.
Yeah. So, I'm probably not the best sort of co-founder advice person, because I didn't map out who my co-founder was going to be. I didn't go like, oh, I have skills in sales and I understand engineering, and so I'm going to look for somebody who understands product. Or I didn't do that. I just started a company with a friend of mine. And the good parts of that is that we trusted each other, that, you know, I think maybe one of the best things that I did up front was, you know, I told Kirk, who is my co-founder, number one, wait 3 weeks and call me in 3 weeks. And if you're still interested, then I'll have a conversation with you. Well, he called me in 3 weeks and I said, yeah, okay, I'll consult on this thing. And Kirk said, well, look, I still want you to be a 50-50 partner in it. And so what I said to Kirk was, okay, well, look, he lived in Las Vegas. I lived in Columbus, Ohio. Look, if you quit your job, and he had a good job, if you quit your job, pack up all your stuff and move to Columbus, Ohio, then I'll start this business with you. And only then would I start this business with you. And he said, okay, great. I'm going to quit on Friday and I'll like figure out how to get to Columbus as soon as possible. Wow. And he did. And so I think that kind of made you realize like there was going to be real commitment to this. And then I felt a great pressure, right? Like it had an equal effect on me because now I made this guy quit his great job and move across country to a place that he doesn't know anybody. This thing better be successful. So making sure you're equally committed, I think, is super important. And then, you know, really carving up duties, I think is valuable. You know, I ran one side of the business, Kirk ran the other side of the business. There was like a very clear delineation of what we did. And then I think one thing that I really appreciate about Kirk is at some point, you know, he didn't want to do it anymore. He just wasn't having fun anymore. And it wasn't his thing. And he was honest about it. And he came to me and said, look, this is the way I feel. And, you know, you can run this business without me, but look, let's make sure the early employees are taken care of. And so let's put aside a big option pool together. And we did that. And he said, look, I'm going to be the biggest cheerleader from the side, but it's kind of your show now. And so if you can find, you know, a co-founder who's willing to be sort of that honest with you about your business, about the business, and is someone who shares how they're feeling in moments and solutions with you, I think that's probably what you're looking for.
Amazing.
Interpersonal skills now, or characteristics I look for now, for better or worse. You know, I wake up every day thinking about all of the things that are wrong with the business, and so I am a feedback giver. And so you need to be able to take feedback from me and know that I'm never personal about my feedback. But when you feel often like you've had a really great month, quarter, day, and something great happened, but I'm focused on the 3 things that are not so great, that doesn't mean I'm not happy about the things that are going great. I am. I just think there's so much more that we can do. I have there's a story of, we hired a new vice president of account management a few years ago, and he came in, he did a great job right out of the gates. We're kind of 2 quarters in, the second quarter was really good. And we do these things at ZoomInfo called monthly operating reviews. So in every department, you sit together and you bring sort of your KPIs for the month, so what went well, what went poorly in the different organizations, stats that back it all up. And then it's just kind of 2 hours of what happened in the month and where for me, it's where there are opportunities for improvement. If it's kind of your first or your second MOR, you might think it's like your opportunity to highlight all the great things you did last quarter. And Tim had a great quarter. And we go into the meeting and we spend the hour going, well, you know, that didn't really go really well. Like, how are we going to fix that? What are we doing over here? Why are we behind on this still? You know, yeah, that went up, but why did it go up? We don't really know why it went up. So maybe it's just anomalous. And we get up and we start walking out of the room, and he leans over to me and he's like, well, congratulations for the great quarter. Hey, you're welcome. You're welcome for the great quarter. And I was like, yeah, like, welcome to ZoomInfo, because we are glad we had a great quarter, but that's how those are always going to be. Like, doesn't matter how great your quarter is, we're always going to go in there and look for opportunities for improvement. And so I look for people who want that, who want to improve and recognize that there are opportunities to improve and realize, like, personally, we can have a great relationship, and then professionally, I'm going to push because I think there's great opportunity all across the business for us to be better. So that's who I'm looking for.
I love it. And I think it directly speaks to company culture as well. We did get a lot of questions on your thinking as to how to build towards a company culture that you resonate with and how you handle any friction arising from new hires or even acquisitions.
Yeah, this one's hard. I spent a good amount of time this year trying to get a feel for not what our culture was or is, because I think our staff can articulate, we move fast, we change quickly, we're constantly looking to improve and define new possibles, we're results oriented, we're data driven. I think you can go around our team and everybody's going to feel that way and they're going to articulate it right. The question I wanted to answer is, where does it come from? Like, because I like that culture. I want that for, forever. But what are the things that we're doing every day across organizations, me, the leadership team, the new hires, the onboarding process? What are the things we're doing that makes that culture come to life? And can we articulate them so we make sure we never lose them? I think there is a likelihood that as an organization grows, they tend to lose these things. And so I know it comes from a lot of places. I don't know the perfect answer on this yet. There is, for sure, it gets set by me. And so, like, I set kind of the pace for the organization and the KPIs that are important and the operating cadence that's important. But then it gets driven down by all of our leadership team. It gets reinforced in onboarding. We do quarterly all hands meetings with all of our teams where you get another opportunity to make sure everybody knows what's important, what the values of the company are, where you're focused. And then as a public company, from a culture perspective, but more from an alignment perspective, as a public company, you have earnings calls every quarter where I get on the phone and I talk to investors and analysts about what went well in the quarter, where we're improving, where we're investing, where we see the big opportunities. And I think just that communication, it's very focused. It's very focused, and it's also very we think a lot about what we're going to say in those calls, because we realize we want to give the best picture of what our true vision for the company is. And when you're forced to spend a lot of time thinking about that, you get a lot more clarity in what the vision is and what the important things are. And so being able to pick that up and then share it with all of the company gets everybody aligned really well.
Perfect. I think something that's really unique about your experience is that from as young as 23, 24, you've already been running an enterprise SaaS business. And that's perspective that not a lot of students will have, because oftentimes in school, your curriculum only exposes you to consumer facing. Yep. So curious how you stumbled across the world of B2B enterprise SaaS. And I'm also getting a few categories of questions that are more generic, like if you were to go back in time and give your advice to your younger self, what you would say, but maybe address that specifically to the direction that you chose.
Yeah, so this is like it's super interesting, because everybody who starts a company when they're, not everybody, most people, the vast majority of people who start a company when they're 23, 25, 24, 25, they start like college textbooks or something for students or
recruiting
schoolers, Hot or Not or Facebook. And they don't, now Facebook's interesting because now it is a B2B company, right? Like there's a huge just advertising arm. But most of the time you're starting a consumer facing thing. And because I worked at the company while I was in college, I got this sort of front row seat to what business to business was. And I remember one of the things that we provide is our organizational charts on the different departments at a company, so you knew who reported, who reports to who at a company. And my boss, he goes, hey, go online and see if you can find out who the VPs of IT are at FedEx. Okay. I go, VPs? He's like, yeah, VPs of IT. I was like, wait, I thought there's like a president and a VP. Like, what do you mean VPs? There's like more than one VP? And he was like, yeah, there's many VPs at a company. There's like lots of VPs, and then there's assistant VPs and senior VPs. And I was like, oh my, I don't know what that means. Banks have more VPs than all other companies. And it just like your context at 18, 19, why would I ever know why there are multiple VPs at a company? I knew like the political world because it's on television. But I didn't know what that was. So without that experience, there's no way I'm starting a B2B company. I just don't have the context for it. So if you have, this is why they go like do internships and, work in the summers. If you have an opportunity to work in like a real business and see, how businesses are run, you'll also see like a whole bunch of inefficiency. Businesses are just rife with operational issues and lack of automation, lack of software, digital tools. And the generation of students today, you're growing up with digital tools. That feels like second nature to you. If you saw the way some company, like most Fortune 1000 companies operate in different places, you'd be shocked. You'd go like, wait a second, isn't there like technology for that? And then you'd probably see the technology for that. And you go, whoa, why does it look like that? Why is it so hard to use? Why is it laid out this way? And so there's just a ton of opportunity in the B2B space. And I was just lucky enough to work for that company and get, a front row seat at it. I was on a call when I was 19 with a VP of sales, just like I accidentally ended up on a sales call. And it's this VP of sales at a software company. I'm super nervous because like now I'm doing this strange sales call. And he's like, we're like the industry or the verticals we're focused on. The verticals we are focused on are finance, healthcare, life sciences. Do you have those verticals? And I'm like, I don't know what a vertical is. Like, I have no idea what a vertical is. And so I'm like writing it down and waiting to get off the call so I could like Google vertical. What's a vertical? And so again, like, it's just hard to have that context if you're not, when was I going to learn what a vertical was? Like when I was 30? Like when was it actually going to come up otherwise in my life if I wasn't shoved into that seat at a company across the table from a VP of sales who asked me what a vertical was? So the experience you get gives you, it's probably a lot less about whether you're pushing paper at some company and a lot more about being in that seat gives you this opportunity to just learn about whatever space you're in, which just gives you a different context for making business startup decisions or career decisions in the future.
Absolutely. I couldn't agree more, but I'm also biased. I invested in Enterprise SaaS in my venture role, and I'm on the faculty at Berkeley where I teach entrepreneurship, and I end up harping a lot about B2B being sometimes a much larger market than B2C companies. So
most often they are. By the way, tell me a B2C company and I'll show you a B2B operation happening inside of it. Like Starbucks, it's B2C, right? You're just buying coffee at a thing. Starbucks has a huge arm that sells directly to businesses for cafeterias and amusement parks and airports. And, Coca-Cola feels like a B2C company, right? But they have a huge arm that sells into restaurants and hospitals and hospitality. And so there is a B2B business inside of everything that feels truly B2C. There's a B2B business there.
I love it. This is great. We did have a follow-up question actually on something we were talking about earlier on hiring great people or just great people in general. Especially for this question, we have people asking, essentially, as a startup founder, they always have this dilemma where if they're great, why don't they start their own company? So as a practical example, how do you identify great employees, keep them inspired and motivated, and how you manage to keep them?
Yeah, so first, not every great person is starting a company. Like that's just, there's the way more people who are great that are not running companies of their own. So there's a huge, there's a huge number of people who are truly great and, and didn't start their own companies. The first, not my first, but probably my third sales hire at ZoomInfo, who ended up being our chief revenue officer when, really up until last year, two years ago. He came to the business. His first day at the job was right out of college. He sat in a chair and I said, fire up Outlook and then and then you'll see some emails I just sent you. And he said, what is Outlook? I don't know. What is Outlook? And it's like, okay, all right, I see where we're starting. Like, I thought we were here. I guess we're going to start way over here. But okay, Outlook is an email. And, he was great. He ran the entire sales and retention department at ZoomInfo for years, and would have never just started a company on his own. And I think really, especially at that age, and really appreciated the opportunity. It gave him a place to grow. So I think when you're hiring, especially in early stage, you want people who want an opportunity to grow. You also often, I think, have to hire people who, almost always, you're hiring people with less experience, like no experience or very little experience, but really high potential. And so identifying that for us, in the early days, I would tell you, we just kind of got lucky. We just got lucky by hiring people who had no experience, but were bought into the company and were bought into learning and growing. And then, also happened to be really, really bright. And the reason I know that is kind of 2011, but 4 years into the company's lifespan, we were really struggling to hire salespeople. And that might not seem like something that's really important, is really important, because you don't really have a business if you're not selling your product. And I wasn't able to hire salespeople, and I would hire 3 and then I'd lose all 3. I'd hire 4 and I'd keep 1. And I didn't know what I was doing wrong. And I pulled all the sales team together and we said, look, let's go through every person we just hired, all 4 of them. And let's talk about why they didn't make it. We wrote all this garbage on the board. No, maybe they're not coachable. Maybe they were this, maybe they're that. No, we had no consensus on it. So we left, problem not solved. And then at some point, somebody gave me a test, like a Wonderlic cognitive type test. It wasn't a Wonderlic at the time. And we took it, and it turned out that everybody who was successful on our sales team was also cognitively above a certain level. And so we said, okay, well, everybody who's done this job well is above, 80% or something on this test. Great. We're going to use that test for all of our sales hires now. And we did, and it worked. And all of a sudden we were able to scale the organization. The people we were hiring were staying, and they were being successful and making a lot of money. And that test worked in sales. It didn't work like at all anywhere else in the organization, but it worked in sales. And so what I would tell you is, once you find something, a group of people that works, but spend a lot of time figuring out what it is about those people that make them work at your company, and then figuring out an objective way to find whatever you identified.
This is great. I remember seeing that you're a big fan of the Omnia cognitive test.
The Omnia test, yes.
Yeah, that's it. Are there any other tools or mental models that you found to be really effective?
So we use something called the predictive index now too. And so this has to evolve, right? Like today, and I've done it, if you just took the Omnia test and slapped it against our new business sales team, it doesn't compute the same way. Like there are really great sales reps who are selling, who have lower Omnia scores than not so good sales reps. And so stage matters, I think. At a company of our size today, there's a lot of enablement, there's a lot of support, leads are being delivered to you. There's a lot less like figure out your day or figure out your systems or figure out how to demo. There's a lot more like, hey, you want to be really successful, do these things. And so that's a different profile that you're looking for. And by the way, the 80 Omnia can be equally successful in that model. And it just, it's just not necessary anymore. And then when you're trying to hire 500 people a year on your team, having the wrong metric that you're hiring against can also really hurt you. So whatever that objective metric is, keep in mind it evolves because your company is changing.
Amazing. So fast forwarding in time to last year, obviously ZoomInfo was the first tech company to go public post some pandemic. What was your thinking around that? How did you decide to take your company public during the midst of COVID?
Yeah, so we were supposed to go public in March 26th, which, is 13 days after the lockdown orders basically came through. And, but we knew going into March that it was going to be unlikely that we were going to go public on the 26th. And we were watching a volatility index. It's called the VIX. And when the VIX was above 20, you couldn't really go public. Or 30, it was above 30, you couldn't go public. Well, there was like a period of time in March where it was like 60, 70. Mm-hmm. And so it was like, okay, well, the market's not open. And then not only is the market not open, but what's going to happen to the business? Because every investor that we talked to not every, but many of the investors we talked to going into launching a roadshow were telling us like, great business, really great business. What happens in a downturn? What happens in a downturn? And, we started the company in 2007. So you went through a downturn, but, we were $1 million ARR company in 2009. So you didn't really know. And now your company's about to go public, and now you're going to have to see what happens in a downturn. And for years, people have told you, great business, what happens in a downturn? And so you're 13 days away from IPOing your business, and all of a sudden you got to go figure out what happens in a downturn. And it turns out that what we believed, which was in a downturn, sales tools don't get cut because it's like the one thing that can continue to drive your business. And number two, that the digitization of how companies sell and market their services has created such a big tailwind that even if some demand slouched, there's enough there that you can continue to really grow at high rates in a really big market. And I think that is what we saw. And so we went through April. We had a great April. It was actually April of 2020 was our best, this is a funny stat, but our best first month in a quarter ever. It's a funny stat because the last month in a quarter historically for SaaS companies is always your biggest month. Your first month will never kind of like shine against that month. So it was our best first month in a quarter ever. We felt really good. The business was continuing to grow and our customers were staying with us. They were buying more from us and our new business was growing too. And so we went back out to our investors and we said, well, here's what's happening. And they said, well, you should go public. Not our investors, our potential public company investors. They go, look, we're fans of this company before the pandemic. We continue to be fans of this company now. We think there's a place for it on the public market. So as the VIX calmed down, our advisors were telling us, well, look to July, sometime in July. And there was no consensus that we wanted to be first. And there was a guy on our board who on a call just went, hey, what if we want to do it faster? Like, what if we want to just get to market faster? We can be the first ones. Nobody has a business that looks like this. We can just be first. Let's just be first. And so we went, okay, well, what would the first date be? And so it ended up being June 4th of 2020. We did a virtual roadshow, which had to be, the second virtual roadshow ever. So we IPO'd right after Warner Music IPO'd on the 3rd, and then we IPO'd on the 4th. And it was, 2020 ended up being actually a pretty good year for software IPOs. And they predicted that it was going to be a big year for software IPOs. But for the first 6 months, there were no IPOs. And so we kind of opened the markets back up June 4th. The IPO was really successful. And we've had almost a year now of being public.
Congratulations on that. Years ago, I was at Goldman covering tech IPOs, so I know all the chaos and stress that goes into this process. So it's amazing that you ended up being the very first tech IPO since.
Yes, lots of chaos though, for sure, but not a lot of travel, which I think creates like even more chaos in these days. Because the way a roadshow works typically is you go to New York and you meet with 8 people in one day, you meet with 8 people the next day in New York, and then you fly to Boston, and then you do Boston for a day, you do 8 people, and then you fly it that night to Chicago, and you do Chicago with 8 people, and you fly the next day to San Francisco, and you do 2 days of back-to-back meetings. Then you go back to New York, you do another set of meetings, and you IPO like one of those nights. And like, that's just like, I don't know how enjoyable IPOs are for founders, because like the tail end of, 3 weeks of that, you're pretty beat. I was pretty beat doing it from my home office. So the virtual IPO was definitely a blessing. But not exactly how you imagined it. It's not how I drew it up.
Yeah. So the last question I'll ask before we open it up to the team, this is actually the last highest voted question that we had, which is obviously as part of the going IPO process, it's important, well, actually throughout the growth of the company, but particularly when you become a public company, your board of directors become extremely important, because that's independent governance. So we have a lot of questions on how do you work with board members? What are best practices? Obviously, you've shared some of this perspective before, where it's not about just someone to tell you what to do and you do that verbatim and copy that, but how do you proactively manage your board relationships, and how do you think about that?
Yeah, so first of all of my board members want to be involved. I don't know if that's like unique about my board members or that's just how board members are, but my board members want to be in the mix. And so knowing that is important. Doing something about it is, that's where your job is. And so I have different board members that I call for different things. There are different places where I go, I really want to talk to, Mark about this, or Mitesh about this, or Todd about that. And so I'm looking, so when there's an issue in the business, when there's something I'm struggling with, when there's an M&A opportunity I want to run past somebody, when I'm thinking about making a statement to the employees about something, there are just different people I'll pull in for different topics. Just from a cadence perspective, we obviously meet quarterly. So we have a quarterly board meeting, and where everybody kind of comes together and we talk about the last quarter of business. We talk about going strategic initiatives, how they're going. We take a temperature on the talent of the organization and things that are going well, things that aren't. And then there are committee meetings outside of that. So there's an audit committee, there's a compensation committee, there's a governance committee. We have a privacy, security, and technology committee. And so those are meeting. Some of them meet around the board meeting, some of them meet sort of in between board meetings. And so those are the formal times you reach out to folks. But, the rest of it is like, if I, read an interesting data privacy article and I want to talk to someone on my board, I call Keith Enright, who's on our board from Google. If I have an interesting M&A idea, I call usually one of my financial sponsors who are doing M&A, and I ask them if they've seen businesses like this. And so depending on what the situation is, I'll call in a different board member, but the key is make it a point to engage your board members.
Perfect. And as Henry, you'll recall, we actually had Keith in March. And we asked him who we thought that he thought that we must have. He was like, you guys must have Henry. Henry is amazing. So thank you for making time to join us.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm a big Keith fan, so.
And I'm sure vice versa is also true. With that, I would love to open the last few minutes to any public questions from anyone in the audience.
Hi, I had a question. My name is Anisha. So I was wondering, like, if you could go back and you could, if there's something that you could know before you, started the company, what would it be like?
Yeah, let me, so hi Anisha, how are you?
Nice to meet you.
If I was to go back and tell myself something, okay, I would probably tell myself, I spent a lot of time in the early years thinking about what I'm going to do after ZoomInfo. And mainly because everyone you talk to, once your company has any bit of success, kind of their first question is, what are you going to do next? 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 And so that it gets in your head that you're expected to just wrap this thing up, sell it, and go do something else. And so I was like, what am I going to do next? When how much money do I need to be able to do whatever I want? And then at some point, I just realized what a stupid question. Why would I want to do anything else? Here's this business that I started. It's going well. I've hired all the people that I want to work with. It's challenging. It's all these new experiences. I don't need to focus on what I need to do next. I need to focus on how to make this thing, the best. And so today when, I still get asked that question or I'll still get asked how long do you think you'll be doing this? I always thought you'd do this for just a few years. And I say I hope you have to drag me out of this place. I really do hope you have to pull me out of the chair because I just got too old and I just wasn't figuring things out anymore. But as long as I'm, adding value to the business and really enjoying what I'm doing and being really challenged, I'd love to do this forever. And so I wish I didn't spend so much time thinking about what I was going to do next.
Thanks for that question.
Thank you so much. Thank you. That was actually really, really insightful. Thank you.
Yep.
So we have only about a minute left. Maybe we'll take one last question, Henry, if that's okay with you.
Yeah.
So maybe we can have a hand raise. The first person's hand to go up will get to ask the last question. I've gotten plenty of DMs for questions, so. Oh, there we go. Lauren.
Hi, Henry. This is Lauren. And so you mentioned in the beginning the story about the company that was started right after you guys with more experienced founders, a lot more funding, and you guys were able to acquire them in the end, which was really incredible. What do you think you had that they didn't have?
Yeah. Yeah, that's a great question. So I can tell you why I think we won there. And I think it's because we were really focused on building a really great go-to-market motion. And so, a lot of times people figure product wins. If you build the best product, you win. I would love it if that was the case, because in a lot of places, I believe, we have the best product and we're still not number one in the space. In this situation, we were less funded. I think we had a really great data product. They had built this really great platform, but we went to market better. We sold better. We marketed better. We explained the value proposition to our buyers better. we supported better, we onboarded better. So we did all of those business things that don't have to do with like just the product, much better and much more. And when I say better, I mean more efficiently. So we were able to do more with less, and then eventually kind of got ahead of them and, you know, kept running. And I think the other piece is like, it is kind of nice to be the underdog sometimes. Like it feels good to win when you shouldn't. And so I think that sort of fueled the fire inside of the company that we really wanted to prove, not only that we were building a great company, but that we could win against people who we really shouldn't have won against. You know, I had this, when I was a freshman in high school, I was a varsity basketball manager, and I got to travel around with this varsity team and watch them play games. There wasn't a single person on the team that year that was taller than 6 feet tall. And they won all sorts of games that they shouldn't have won. And our coach would always say, like, look, there are games that we shouldn't win. There are games we absolutely should win. And then there are games that there's no reason why anyone would believe we could ever win. And when you start winning those games and you're winning some that you shouldn't win, you just get this like motion going at a company that you become really hard to beat.
Awesome. Thanks.
Yeah.
With that, thank you so much for your time with us today, Henry. I think everyone here, as well as anyone who watches the recording later, can hear your energy and passion and that commitment to making this the best. So thank you.
Absolutely.
Really
Thanks for having me.
you sharing.
So I didn't hear
pass
you.
It back to.
Great. Thank you guys very much.
Thank you.
Talk to you
Thank
soon.
you very
so
much. I'll pass it back to Melissa to close up.
Yeah, well, we hope to see you again at our next speaker event on May 5th. So stay tuned for more details. I told you guys what I need to say in the beginning. So we have all the information about Deco that you need. So yeah. Bye guys.
Great.
Good night.
Thanks, Melissa. Bye, everyone.
Bye.